All right, everyone. Welcome to Passover 2026. And I apologize in advance. I forgot my notes. I forgot to print my notes. So I have my notes here. So in between each slide, I'm going to be struggling a little bit, right? Just letting you know. But what an honor to have you all with us today. So this is going to be a two-part teaching, 2 in 1. The first part is called Crucifixion, Truth or Fiction. And the second part is going to be called, Is Passover Over? And and you'll come to see that this teaching is full of Easter eggs.
He's on fire. He's on fire.
But let's be serious, okay? So many people raise some very important questions about the crucifixion events described in the 4 Gospels. And I personally witnessed some brothers in the faith that departed from the faith because of the contradictions that are found in the 4 Gospels about the crucifixion events. And many questions arise like this one. Was Yeshua crucified on like a Good Friday? And was the next morning the weekly Sabbath? Or was he crucified on the day before the first day of unleavened bread, right? Before the high Sabbath? And another question is, when calculating the crucifixion and burial events described in the 4 Gospels, it is often easy to see that the events are too hard to fit in one evening before, if Christ was really buried before sunset, like Matthew, Mark, and Luke describe, how can we fit all of these events in one night? It seems unrealistic. And also, why did the women that saw Yeshua get crucified, why did they come back to embalm the body 72 hours later? Right? So these are all questions that we need to answer. So weren't these women present at the cross, right? As the Gospel of John says. And you'll come to see that in these teachings we're going to answer these questions using the Hebrew Gospels found on HebrewGospels.com. So let's attack the first question. Was Christ crucified on what we would call a Friday, the day before the weekly Sabbath? Or was Christ crucified on the day before the first day of unleavened bread, which is called Passover? Well, in John 19:31 it says, the Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. And you have also, so it is clear that Yeshua was not crucified on Good Friday. He was crucified on Passover, which is the day before the high Sabbath, as the text says. And the Hebrew Gospel supports this in much better details. Mark 15:42, and as it became evening, already entering into the feast of unleavened bread, that is before the Sabbath. So based on this, it is safe to say that Yeshua was crucified not on Good Friday. He was crucified on the day before the high Sabbath, not before the weekly Sabbath. So just so you can see, look at these 2 verses here, okay? So I just want to compare them. This is from the King James above, and the one below is from the Hebrew Gospels. Those are the same verses, and look, let's read Mark. And now when the evening was come, because it was the preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath. And then Mark 15:42, the same verse in the Hebrew Gospel. And as it became evening, already entering into the feast of unleavened bread, that is before the Sabbath. So we can see that the King James does not even mention the feast of unleavened bread, meaning it was not the 15th of Aviv yet. Passover and unleavened bread were used interchangeably, and the feast of Passover and unleavened bread starts on the 14th of Aviv before the sunset, while the high Sabbath starts at the sunset, and which marks the beginning of the 15th of Aviv. Now, this shows how the Greek manuscripts have contributed to all the confusion on when Christ was crucified. And for now, we will leave this question here, even though a full teaching could be done just on that topic. And for this question, it is safe to conclude that indeed Yeshua was crucified on the day before the high Sabbath. Okay?
Which one's the most accurate then?
Sorry?
The King James or the Hebrew?
Hebrew.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my argument is that the Hebrew gospel is more reliable
Okay.
because it gives.
But why did they change that in the King James version?
Well,
Like why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's the most accurate one, why? Like, is there a reason why they changed
They
it?
just
well,
didn't have detail.
the Hebrew gospels. Okay, let's tackle this question. So which one is more reliable, right? So the Hebrew Gospels, they are manuscript that are not popular among the scholars and the doctors of the law of nowadays or whatever. Those are medieval manuscripts that have been found across the world, some in Russia, some in India, some in Britain and whatever, right? In the synagogues, they found them, they were preserved there, and some scholars gathered them all together. And they tested all the the Hebrew manuscripts that they had to see which one were authentics and they have multiple proofs to show that the ones that were authentic can only be copies of older Hebrew manuscripts, and they have multiple ways to prove that. And so I strongly encourage all of you to go on HebrewGospels.com and read the Hebrew Gospels they have there. They also have Revelation, James, and Jude available to buy on Amazon. Okay, so so this is it here. Now, so another question arises when comparing the four Gospels about Yeshua's death and burial. Why would the women come to anoint Yeshua's body a second time? And Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus had already anointed it 3 days earlier. Weren't these women present during the crucifixion? Surely they would have known that Yeshua had already been embalmed, and it was done before the tomb was sealed at sunset. Okay, so let's read here. John 19:39-40. And there came also Nicodemus, the man who visited Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, but about 100-pound weight. Then took they the body of Yeshua and wound it in linen cloths with the spices, as the manner of the Jews is to bury. And also in Mark 16, verse 1, and when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. All right, so here we can see that Mark, Matthew, and Luke says that Yeshua's body was buried before sunset. The Gospels say that the woman saw where and how the body was buried. John says Joseph and Nicodemus brought 100 pounds of ointment and anointed Yeshua's body. It also described Nicodemus as having visited Yeshua by night, right? Making reference to the first time that Yeshua and Nicodemus ever met in John chapter 3. Based on the Greek Gospels, it seems unreasonable to say that the women did not know that the body had already been anointed, since they were present at the burial. This creates a puzzle. Why would the women go back to anoint Yeshua's body a second time 72 hours later? So the Hebrew Gospels of John provide the answer. It states that Yeshua was anointed by Joseph and Nicodemus in the night. Okay, so let's see. From the Hebrew Gospel, John 19:39, Joseph and Nicodemus came to Yeshua in the night, bringing myrrh and anointing the body. And this means, according to what happened, the anointed happened after sunset, not before. But the King James does not say that Nicodemus came to Yeshua in the night. And this is a very important detail. It says, Nicodemus, the man who visited Jesus by night. So there's a clear difference here. So here's the sequence of events according to the Hebrew text. Yeshua's body was quickly placed in the tomb before sunset. The women likely saw that the burial was rushed and incomplete, and they planned to return after the high Sabbath to properly anoint the body. After sunset, Joseph and Nicodemus returned to the tomb with the ointment. Joseph had already become ritually unclean by touching the dead body. Because of the impurity, Joseph would celebrate Passover 1 month later, according to Numbers 9. Therefore, he was not required to rest at sundown on the high Sabbath. Joseph and Nicodemus completed the anointing during the night after sunset. The women did not know about this nighttime anointing. Now this explains why the women came after the high Sabbath intending to anoint Yeshua's body. They believed that the burial had not been completed yet, and they were unaware of the nighttime anointing by Joseph and Nicodemus. Skeptics use this apparent contradiction in the Greek gospel to cast doubt on the burial and the resurrection. The Hebrew Gospel of John removes this contradiction and clarifies the sequence. The Greek translation appears to have mistranslated the Hebrew. The Greek, John 19:39, adds the phrase, which at first came to Yeshua, to Jesus by night, to reinterpret the Hebrew wording. So the Greek translators likely assumed that the Hebrew text was mistaken because Matthew, Mark, and Luke says that his burial happened before sunset. They concluded that in the night must refer to Nicodemus' earlier nighttime visit to Yeshua. This change altered the meaning and obscured the original sequence. The Hebrew reading is clear and unambiguous. It says Joseph and Nicodemus came in the night to anoint Yeshua's body. It cannot naturally be translated the way that the Greek version renders it. The Greek translators changed the meaning to correct what they thought was an error. The Hebrew text preserves the original account. The Greek translation is a later interpretation by people who were not present at his death. And they did not understand that Joseph and Nicodemus made a nighttime visit to complete the burial. Their attempt to fix the scriptural mistake hid the real explanation for why women returned to anoint Yeshua's body. Now, this brings us to the next question and the last about in the first part of this teaching. With all the narrative described in the fourth gospel, many raise the issue that it is virtually impossible to fit all the events before sundown. Let's review all what these events are, and we're going to use realistic timing for each event, and we're also going to take the position that the embalming happened before sunset as the Greek manuscripts propose, just to see at what time we end up. Okay, so there's Yeshua's death to burial at 3 p.m. Okay, so Yeshua dies at 3 p.m. And then at 3:05 to 3:40, the Jewish leaders go to Pilate to request the body's removal. So 35 minutes from the walk from Golgotha to Pilate is 15 to 40 minutes, and waiting for an audience with Pilate, it's again 15 to 20 minutes. And then from 3:40 to 4:15, the soldiers return to Golgotha and break the legs. So 35 minutes, that would be the walk from Pilate to Golgotha, 15 to 20 minutes again, breaking the legs of the two criminals and spear thrust to Yeshua. That's 10 to 15 minutes. And then from 4:15 to 4:55, Joseph of Arimathea goes to Pilate to ask for the body. Realistic duration, that's 40 minutes. So there's the walk from Golgotha to Pilate, 15 to 20 minutes. And then the waiting in the audience with Pilate, that's 15 to 20 minutes again. And then from 4:55 to 6 p.m., it's 65 minutes. The centurion, there's a time loop with the centurion. Pilate's messenger goes to Golgotha. That is 15 to 20 minutes. The centurion leaves the cross and goes back to Pilate. That's again 15 to 20 minutes. He reports to Pilate, 5 to 10 minutes, and the centurion returns from Pilate to Golgotha. That's 15 to 20 minutes. From 6 p.m. to 6:20 p.m., Joseph receives permission and return to the cross. So he's got to walk from Pilate to Golgotha. That's 15 to 20 minutes. And then from 6:20 to 8:30 or 8:50 p.m., it's 2 hours 10 minutes or to 2 hours and 30 minutes. You have to remove the nails, lowering the body carefully. That's 35 minutes to 45 minutes. And then carrying the body near the tomb, that's 10 to 15 minutes. And then you have, you wrap the body in linen, applying a large amount of ointment and placing it in the tomb, rolling the stone, that's 90 minutes. Now you all may be wondering, why does this even matter? And I will tell you why. According to the Gospels, Yeshua was buried before sundown. Sunset in Jerusalem and Passover generally falls around 5:45 to 6:15 p.m. local time. So when we consider the realistic events, we get more around 8:30 p.m., which is a huge problem. This means that with a realistic analysis of the events of the Gospels, it is not only unrealistic, but it seems also impossible. But wait, remember how I told you that in the Hebrew Gospels, the women came to, Nicodemus and Joseph came to Yeshua's body by night to anoint him to complete the burial. So Nicodemus got Yeshua off the cross. He hurried up to get him in the tomb. And because Nicodemus was unclean, as you can see here, this is the passage about Numbers, talking about how when you are unclean, there is a second Passover, so the first Passover does not apply to you, and this is when you touch a dead body. This is why you would have a second Pesach, and this is in the Hebrew, they call it Pesach Sheni, which is the second Pesach. And so anyone who becomes ritually unclean by touching a corpse, like Joseph handling Yeshua's body, cannot keep the normal Passover at 14 of Nisan, and then they would keep it the 14th of the second month of the year. So knowing that Yeshua's tomb was shut closed at sunset, we can assume that Joseph and Nicodemus probably hurried up to take Yeshua off the cross and quickly wrapped him in linen, then came back in the night to properly complete the burial rites. So with this information, the Hebrew Gospel goes from impossible to realistic and plausible. And so you see how important it is to actually know the Torah in order to read the text properly. And not only this, but it's also very important to read from the original Hebrew manuscripts, because the Greek translators often change what it was written down when they suspected that there were scriptural errors to fix. However, in this case, the Greek translators changed the text because they did not understand the Torah correctly, and they were not present at the death and burial of Yeshua. So now we can put all these three cases to rest.